daily breakdown of every NASCAR Cup Series race. Here are your hosts, Kevin Batstone, NASCAR Sky, and Jeff Davis.
Welcome back to NASCAR Nation to another episode of Mash the Gas Podcast. Got a lot to break down here for the 66th running of the Coca-Cola 600 out in Charlotte. Joining me shortly is Miss NASCAR Sky and Kevin Batstone right now. Hey, Kevin, who mashed the gas this weekend?
Well, we got to give it up to Team Trackhouse. These guys have been chomping at the bit, getting better each week, unloading with a little bit more speed. Started P40, drove all the way through the field, only led 8 laps. Ross Chastain, the Watermelon Man, getting it done, getting to smash that melon at the Coke 600. That's a big win for him, for this team, and I know these guys are going to build off of it. Sky, you picked him last week to win this race. Great call there.
Yeah, I was just basing off vibes. I just had a good feeling that Ross was going to get it done. Trackhouse really needed to turn the year around. I mean, they've been all right, but they're not the level that they need to be. And everybody else at Trackhouse didn't do too well, so it's good that Ross was carrying the torch there.
Absolutely. And, it was really cool to see him again with the watermelon on top. The fans loved it. They were cheering him on. It was his first win of the year, so good for him. It's his 6th career win overall. Pretty damn good race. I mean, you have to give it up to William Byron as well. I mean, he had 65 points out of 71 total points, so you can't complain too awful bad as far as his overall finish. So, with that extra stage, it really gave him those extra playoff points, finishing 1, 2, 3 and sweeping the stages.
Yeah, that was the big takeaway for the 24. I mean, obviously it's a heartbreak. He, got the win in the Xfinity race, so he can check that off for his hometown, but he really wanted to win in Cup in that 24 car. But yeah, he picked up some great stage points, continues to lead in the overall point standing. So he's patenting his position there. Those guys just have a lot of speed right now. Their mile-and-a-half program's dialed. Obviously his teammate Kyle Larson, not the weekend those guys were looking for. I mean, Indy was kind of a disaster to start with a little bit of the rain there. That put pressure on the timing of everything. And then Larson goes out, relatively early, lap 93 in the Indianapolis 500, comes down to Charlotte, just can't complete the double. I feel bad for those guys. I know there's a lot of work that goes into running that double and not the result that they were looking for.
No, it definitely wasn't. I mean, it was tough to see him and how he did down or up in Indy and then to come in Charlotte. I mean, he came back from spinning out, by himself. He was not the only one that had trouble right there, but spinning out from the lead, and then he came back and got caught up in just someone else's mess. It is just really unfortunate for him. I did see they asked him after, even though it was a little hard to hear him after when he was in the info care or coming out of the info care center, but they asked if he was thinking about doing it again next year, and he pretty much said he's just not sure it's worth it anymore. It's just too much stress. Essentially, it's just with the timing and everything. But it was a little interesting how he was wording it. He said he was really interested in running, the 500, but he's not interested in running both. So maybe we'll see what that means in the future. I mean, obviously he'll be around for a few more years in NASCAR, but I don't know. It's just interesting how he worded it, I thought.
Yeah, overall, really tough break for Kyle Larson. Like I said, not having the day he wanted in Indy. Like you said, turn 4 was just a mess. He spun out there once, tapped the wall again, spun out twice. And then, after Daniel Suarez, in my opinion, I think I saw the 99 come up just a little bit. Blaney got crunched into the wall up there up top. He probably didn't know he was there. So it was a really, really tough day for Blaney. I thought he was doing pretty good, even though he started late, kind of, further back in the field. Penske had a hard time. But, after that little bit of mayhem, Kyle Larson get caught up in it again, and just a really bad day. And I don't want to sit here and talk, the Kyle Larson show all day, all night, whatever. But what a really disappointing day. And, like you mentioned, he doesn't know if it's worth trying the double again. And he even came out and Bob Pockers caught him saying that, I don't think they should even try to adjust the schedules just to make it work. It's just not worth it anymore.
Well, it's just so much on the driver. I mean, we see how much goes into Indy. I mean, they take a full month of practice and qualifying, and it's, back and forth and trying to run the Cup stuff and trying to run the dirt stuff and trying to be a family man. It puts a lot on them. So I don't think we see Kyle running again next year. That's just my early prediction. But does that open the door for another Cup guy to do it? I know Kyle Busch wants to do it. He was on a podcast with Burt Kreischer a couple weeks ago, and he said that he had it ready. The contract was signed, ready to go, and somehow Kyle Larson ended up getting that seat. This would have been the 2024 attempt. But do we see another Cup guy try to run the double? I think, Kyle's brother Kurt did it. We know Kyle would want to probably put his name on that. I could see it being a possibility, but the sponsors have to line up, the manufacturers have to be on board. So much planning that goes into it. Probably won't be a 2026 deal. Kyle's getting a little bit late in his career, but is there anybody else in the field that you think would try to attempt the double?
I don't know at this point. I mean, Kyle Larson's only the fifth driver to ever try it. To see him, came in 18th at the Indy. Obviously, I'm sorry, 18th in the Indy, and then got a DNF. Yeah, at the Coca-Cola 600. Tony Stewart, had the best finish. He finished P6 at the Indy 500, and then wound up being P3 out of the Coca-Cola 600. But before that, we're going back to Robbie Gordon and John Andretti. So I don't know if we're going to see anyone in the near future try it or not. It's just a difficult thing to do, and the stars just have to align properly.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see anybody, maybe besides, like you said, Kyle Busch would be probably the only person, maybe someone else from Hendrick, just because Hendrick has, strings that he can pull for sure. I don't know who else I definitely see, but it was an interesting race. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed Prime a lot. I mean, it was such a breath of fresh air coming from Fox going to Prime. I mean, I thought the graphics were great. I thought the commentary was great. I really loved, seeing Carl Edwards and hearing him, and when they had Jeff up in the booth for a little bit there, like obviously Dale Jr. I mean, I don't know how you guys felt about Prime, but I really, really enjoyed Prime.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think right out of the gate when I watched practice and qualifying Saturday morning with the Prime team, just the whole sound of it, everything, the way that they were capturing the sound of the race cars. They had their stand at the end of pit road, and you'd hear them ripping off. It just felt like it was a little bit more of a grassroots approach. We're down on the racetrack. You can hear what's going on. You can feel what's going on. The energy was high. And I thought Corey LaJoie did a great job too. I wasn't too sure how LaJoie was going to do in a primetime position like that. As an analyst and down in the the table there with Daniel Trott and Carl Edwards. But every time they cut to them, the energy was good. Junior and Letarte, they've worked together not only as crew chief and driver, but up in the booth as analyst. I thought they did fantastic, and good for Double A too. Double A's been calling a lot of Xfinity races, so this is a big opportunity for him to be kind of the play-by-play Cup guy.
Yeah, definitely a very, very better quality of a broadcast, not podcast, broadcast for Prime. I thought they did a really good job the entire time that there was action going on as far as the cars were actually running. They ran side by side, didn't go to any commercials unless it was directly under like a caution, and they just had some time to kill. But they had continuous cars going the whole time. They showed pit stop times every once in a while, so I think they could improve on that. But overall, yeah, to see Carl Edwards in there was awesome. Like I said, Corey LaJoie did a good job. And I've always loved Daniel Trotta. One of the funniest things I thought those at the very end of the race when they were talking to old William Byron in the 24 car, and he sits down next to Carl Edwards. He's like, it's finally glad to meet you. I mean, I think he was about 15 or 16 years old when old cousin Carl, when he retired. So he'd never even met him. So it was really cool for William Byron. But one thing I wanted to talk to you guys just a little bit towards the end of the race, or let's take it out through the whole race. William Byron had a move that he was doing every time Denny Hamlin caught the lead. He would get him into turn 3, coming really fast out of turn 4. He would cut down bottom and cut right back up in front and take that P1 position away from Denny Hamlin. He had been doing it all night long. And towards the end of the race, when, Ross Chastain in the number 1 car got the lead, there's only about 6 laps left to go. And he tried pulling that move. Denny Hamlin was right there and purposely, in my opinion, cut off the 24 car and actually pushed him up and then went past both of the cars, because he was a lap down due to the pit fuel situation. And I don't know. I think, in my opinion, I think the number 11 kind of purposely cut him off just to piss him off.
I haven't listened to Denny's podcast. I don't know if you've even brought it out this week. I did see that, but I mean, it definitely could have been intentional. I mean, maybe Denny was definitely upset. I mean, I would be too. It was like 12 laps to go when he had to come down pit road or whatever, and he was having such a good race. So I can understand the frustration, but I could understand being frustrated as the 24 as well. I did see someone else was saying that Joey Logano was also cutting some air or doing something that caused the 24 to not be able to pass the 1, but honestly, that's just also part of racing, I guess. The whole aero blocking. I mean, we've seen that, Ross years ago whenever Blaney was winning the championship. But I wouldn't put it past Denny. Denny is definitely somebody I could see intentionally doing something like that, but I guess I can't speak for him, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of the product of mile and a half racing now. We saw similar things in Texas with trying to, pull the air off a guy, aero block a little bit. The one of Chastain was just so much quicker than the 24. The 24 just ran out of options. Ross was able to drive it in really deep into the inside and take that preferred lane. and get up on the 24. And then that was just too late because, when we saw Denny out front, Denny was pretty good on those short runs. He led 53 laps, but the 24 would start to eat into it. They were going back and forth. I thought the battle between the 24 and the 11 was some of the best racing throughout the entire night. And then, the Denny situation is just unfortunate. You go from really being ranked #1 pit crew. I mean, he was cranking off 9.3, 9.7 pit stops all night. And then they go in there and the fuel man is just dumping fuel all over the ground, lost 10, 15 laps worth of fuel and just killed his night. You could see the frustration in the interview post race. And so, like Denny said, I mean, all he can do is drive the car. That's on the pit crew. But critical mistake, was that the winning move or race losing move? I still think Chastain had the speed to beat both those guys.
Yeah, Chastain really did have it going on, and it was really cool to see. I mean, we had 34 different lead changes with 11 different drivers. Kyle Larson, he was right up there. I mean, I thought, man, at the beginning of the race, he was just a rocket. I thought it was going to be the William Byron and Kyle Larson show until they wrecked out. I mean, he led 34 laps, but obviously, that got cut off pretty short. But overall, I agree. I think it was a really good race. It was very entertaining. Man, 600 laps is a lot of laps, or not 600 laps, but just 600 miles. That was a lot of racing to do. So I'll bet those guys are very tired, and you could see how much it drained Kyle Larson, even though, he got out of there a little bit early, just having to run between Indy and back to Charlotte, just really hard on the driver. But yeah, as far as Prime, I know they've got another 4 races, and we'll get into National here in a little bit. But I really loved it. I think the commentary was great. I love the crews they had on the pits. It was just good overall.
Yeah, what makes it also just really more impressive with Ross Chastain and his win, not only obviously did he come back from the back, but I mean, he was in a backup car too. These other guys like William Byron and whatnot, I mean, they're running the cars that they brought to the track to run. So it kind of surprised me that, he was as good as he was in a backup car. The 45, Tyler Reddick, that's another guy that I was a little impressed with because I mean, like the last, 2 years, last year, he was someone we talked about pretty much week in and week out, almost like literally every single week. He was contending for a win or winning stages, but this year he's almost been invisible, non-existent. So it was good to see him get some good runs. I don't know, I don't have it around me right now. I don't know where he finished, but it was good to see he at least got a decent run.
Yeah, they're definitely making some progress for sure. I think 23XI, where they were last year, I don't think they're quite there yet. I mean, we said that about Trackhouse a few weeks ago, and those guys have found some speed. I mean, his teammate Daniel Suarez obviously didn't have the results that Ross did, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned he was in a backup car. You go to practice, and he blows a right front, puts the thing in the fence, and they got to go to a backup car. I mean, similar to what we saw in Kansas, the bumps at Charlotte, add such a variable to the way these guys have to race, and they're trying to get everything they can out of it. So the air pressures are low. Obviously they adjusted that a little bit in the race, but those bumps, rattling your head around for 600 miles, 400 laps, trying to keep your focus. I mean, this is an intense race on a driver to stay focused that long. I mean, when we hit lap 267, I was telling everyone that was watching, at my watch party, this is it. That would have been the end of the race if this was a Texas 400 or a lot of our other 400-mile races at mile and a half. But no, we still had another, 200 miles of racing. So it's tough on equipment. It's tough on drivers. And, we saw it. These guys started to fatigue. They started to make mistakes. They overdrove it in the quarter. I think shout out to AJ Allmendinger with Colleague Racing. What a fantastic run that he had. Great qualifying attempt and ended up with a P5. I think I was really surprised by the 16 finishing in the top 10.
Yeah, the overall top 10 was pretty interesting. And Tyler Reddick, he was running really well throughout majority of that race. What really bit him in the ass is when he got that speeding penalty and had to do the drive-through lap. Luckily, it did put him a lap down, but it did put him at the very end of the first guy at the end of being on the lead lap. So unfortunately for Ty Gibbs on that portion, Bubba Wallace, he's doing all right. I mean, he's only got 2 top 5 finishes this season. He's led 103 laps so far. I think he's got a little bit of room for improvement. But one of the big things that I kind of got out of this whole race was just really how cool it was to see Ross Chastain up there and how excited the crowd was. A lot of times we hear a lot of, boos, hisses, or, 50-50 out there in the crowd, but everyone just ate it up. Ross Chastain, he was so excited. I think, now that he's been in the Cup Series for a few years, like you mentioned, the first year, he was kind of, pulling like a little bit like the Carson Hocevar 77. But Carson Hocevar actually did really impress me during this race. He ran a really clean race, and he was up there in the top 5 for quite a while. Yeah, again, I just think that the 77's got a little more to learn. But Ross Chastain is taking him some time, and now he's getting to where he wants to be.
Yeah, he's matured as a driver for sure. Ross has kind of figured out what to do by finding out what not to do. And I think Hocevar is going through that same thing. And, you mentioned Carson. I think it was a great run, right around that 400-mile mark. He was right there for what would have been a top P3 position. Again, I mean, he has speed. He can drive through the field. He qualifies well. He's got all the pieces. He just needs to put the whole thing together. They even asked Jeff Gordon up in the booth, what do you think of this kid? Because, Gordon's been known for finding talent. He said early Kyle Larson was a talent. He found Jimmy Johnson when no one else did. And Gordon went on record to say, hey, man, if a guy's fast, he shows it young. I mean, he's 22 years old. We're going to be talking about Carson Hocevar for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Carson Hocevar is doing a really good job and bringing up old Jimmy Johnson. Hated to see the finish that he got. Obviously, a pretty bad DNF, but this was his 700th start, and I just don't think, like, I can remember who said it. One of the commentators was saying it's hard for him to jump in this next gen car and have the experience that these other drivers have. When you're only running a handful of races every year, like Jimmy is, it's hard to get out of everything you can out of that car. But it was cool to see him in there for his 700th career start.
Yeah, Jimmy, he's been having some tough luck in this. Ever since he comes back. It's honestly unfortunate because he is such a good driver. I mean, fortunately, he finished well in the Daytona 500. That was like the highlight of that, honestly. I was rooting for Carson Hocevar at the end there. I mean, my Penske guys, that they didn't do too well, so I didn't have much going for me for the end. But it was unfortunate to see it end how it did for him. I don't quite know if it was him that did it or if it was just his engine or what happened there. But I definitely agree. Carson's going to be around for a while. I mean, in a few years, he's going to be probably top contender, someone that we're going to talk about week in and week out. A lot of people that surprised me in the top 10 at the finish there. Chase Briscoe finished P3, which I thought was pretty interesting, as well as, oh my gosh, Brad Keselowski, top 5. Are you kidding me? That is so exciting. I was so happy about that because he's had such bad luck.
Yeah, he really has. He needed something positive to go his way. And, there was even a time where he was, out there contending for the lead, trying to catch an off pit sequence there, and it just didn't pan out. But it panned out well enough that he was able to get a top 5. He needed it. He's still mired way deep in points. I still think Brad is in a must-win situation to make the playoffs. But this is something these guys can build off of, right? They have a little momentum. We saw, the speed out of the 17 and the 60 at times. RFK is in a good place. I think they are. They just need to get out of their own way. They need to, they're a little bit snake bit with some bad luck, engine failures. There's certain things that those guys can't control. But I think given all those circumstances, he's got to be excited about that P5 finish.
100%. Yeah, he's got to be really stoked on that. And he ran a good race. Penske, like you mentioned, Sky, that just didn't have it. Just didn't have it this weekend. Obviously, it wasn't Blaney's fault that he got wrecked out and finished into P38, and the 22 Logano got P17. But one thing I want to talk a little bit about is the number 2 of Austin Cindric. He finished P31. He's not having quite the year he has, and then with all the stuff that's been going on over in the IndyCar series with his dad being fired as the president there. Interesting to see how that's going to affect him running with Penske overall. I know we haven't touched too much on the Indy 500 and how much Roger Penske owns between the both teams and in Indianapolis Motor Speedway, as well as just IndyCar racing in general. I don't know quite exactly what that cheating scandal was about, but it was really interesting and really abrupt news to see the top 3 guys over at Penske on the Indy side get the axe.
Well, and yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because we know that the Indy side and the NASCAR side are in the same race shop, right? And Roger Penske is the captain of it all. And of course, he gave some words at the beginning of the Indy 500. Roger Penske's old school; he's not going to put up with nonsense. So, the details of the cheating scandal, I haven't really seen what that looks like. We know that those guys had to go to the rear, Joseph Newgarden and a couple of those other guys over there. But how does this affect Austin Cindric, I guess, is the big question. We've been seeing a lot of contract renewals come out this year. Obviously, we know that Kyle Busch is coming back next year. We know that William Byron has extended with Hendrick Motorsports. Does this play into Austin Cindric's future with Penske Motorsports? I think it's on the table. But what does he have going for him, Jeff? He does have a win this year. He did win the Jack Links 500 at Talladega. That's more than he can say about his teammate Ryan Blaney. So he has a win in the bank right now. But how much does this deter his focus, and how much does this weigh on the team as a whole? Because Team Penske was just off all weekend.
Exactly. And, being that he does have that win, we're going to have to see where he can go in the playoffs. Hopefully he can start running a little bit better in these last few races we have before we start the playoffs. We're about halfway through it, but he really needs to boost it up. So I think it really depends on how far he goes. I don't know if he has one more year on his contract or not with Penske, or if he'll be renewing the 24. Rick Hendrick renewed him through 2029, and then, like you said, RCR gave Kyle Busch one more year that he's committed to. So, some interesting news between those contract extensions, and we're gonna have to see what old Austin Cindric can do. Going into the playoffs and how far he can succeed. Hopefully, he'll get another win out of it. And I think if he secures another win, get some good finishes out of it, and gets in maybe like the second to the third round of the playoffs, I don't think he'll have any issues. I think Roger Penske knows if he's got a good driver, he's got a good driver. He's just like Gibbs and Hendrick. They know top talent, and they're going to keep it. If he can keep around well, I think he'll keep them around.
I definitely agree. I feel like he's definitely done. This is probably Austin Cindric's best year in Cup. I feel like if this would have happened maybe 2022, 2023, definitely could have made a argument that he probably would be out of a ride. But we don't, I mean, I don't really know. I don't know much either about what the cheating scandal is. I think it had something to do with like the bodies of the car or something over there in Indy. But I would like to think it wouldn't affect it, but I mean, it's so hard to tell. You could make a argument that you could put Josh Berry in the two, because I feel like Josh Berry has been, if you consider him Penske, I mean, he's been one of the best Penske guys this year, at least I feel. I mean, he's pretty much contending week in and week out. It honestly surprised me much for him. So, yeah, I'm not too sure what. I did look it up, and his contract, Cindric's contract is up this year. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, we usually start hearing, those rumbles as we get pretty much from now, right? We get through the All-Star, we get through Coke 600, through the summers when we start to hear these contract negotiations and extensions and who's going where and what seat's going to open up. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, I'd like to think that, this shouldn't affect Austin Cindric directly. I wouldn't think, like we said, he's got to win. He's out there doing, Sky mentioned some of the best season he's had, since the Daytona 500 win he had a few years ago. So I think him as a driver personally, he's doing everything he can. I think the sponsors are still in good shape with Team Penske, but it's those variables, you mentioned Josh Berry. Again, this guy has a win over there at Las Vegas, way outperforming what Harrison Burton did last year in the 21. So, there's some contenders out there. And if you slip up, you make mistakes, your seat's up for grabs. But I just feel like we need to see how much this affects Austin directly, because all the Indy nonsense and his dad and all that's really out of his control.
It is, and it really shouldn't have to affect anything on his part as far as the NASCAR side goes. That honestly would not be fair to him. Like I said, if he can get those finishes and he can, obviously he's already made it into the playoffs. If he runs well and gets top finishes, there's no reason not to extend him on at least another 2-year contract. So, I think those are in the cards, and it's kind of in his hands right now. But Penske overall, Joey Logano doing pretty well. Ryan Blaney, he's struggling a little bit this year. I just haven't seen the speed in Blaney that we've seen in the past, which has really surprised me for Ryan Blaney. He's one of my favorite drivers. So I hope he can get with it as well.
Well, and Blaney's in a good points position too. Blaney finds ways to pick up points even when it doesn't look like he's performing, right? Kind of like Chase Elliott, just secretly, the silent sniper, if you will. I mean, Chase is in a great points position, hasn't found victory lane. Blaney's sitting P7 in points right now. Could it come down to a situation where he has to point his way in? Possibly. There's still so many races that we have to get through and so many different variables. But I do believe that Ryan Blaney has the speed, has the team to win races. I think Penske was just a little bit off. I think they're going to go back, at the team meeting today and tomorrow, take a look at it, regroup, and get ready for Nashville.
Yeah, and another one was, like you mentioned a little bit about the silent guys like Chase Elliott so far this year. He wound up with the P6 and the Coca-Cola 600, and he just didn't have speed this entire race. I was actually very surprised he was able to get a top 10 finish. He just didn't have it, in my opinion. He just didn't have what it took this race to get up in the top 5 or even run up there. He didn't even lead a single lap, unfortunately. But we'll have to see what he has to do here in Nashville next week.
Yeah, it should be good. I mean, Blaney got a top 10 last year in Nashville, so hopefully, I mean, if I had to put someone as the strongest Penske driver right now, I mean, I got to give it to Ryan Blaney. Even though it's a little hard to compare the Nashville race last year because of how it ended, it was such a mess. I definitely feel like, I mean, he's good at those super speedways. He definitely can probably contend next week for a win.
Yeah, I mean, last year was one of the craziest overtime finishes we've seen. I mean, we were scheduled for 300 laps, and we ran 331 laps. Like, I can't remember exactly. It was 6, 7 overtime attempts, which allowed Joey to kind of, get up there. He only led 9 laps throughout the race, but, it only matters with the last one that he led. And, there was Tyler Reddick was up there, Ryan Preece, of course, he was running for a different organization. Chris Buescher was up there. A lot of Fords, I think the Fords are strong in Nashville. So, and you go back 2 years ago, Ross Chastain won this race. So something to build on for him. He's coming off that momentum. I think Chastain's really good at riding that momentum. We saw his playoff run a couple years ago. So, Nashville, kind of unique track, right? It's that 1.33 concrete oval. I mean, it's not it's the same size as Darlington, but completely different configuration. And, Cup guys haven't been running here long enough for us to really see trends. We've seen a lot of different winners here. I can't say the Chevys, the Fords, or the Toyotas have an advantage right now. And, after what we saw last week, is Penske even in the conversation heading into Nashville? I don't know.
This one's going to be really tough. Like I said, it was such a shit show at the end of last year's race. It was just crazy to see that anyone could have won that race. But Penske and I think Hendrick had some pretty good finishes in there as well. It's going to be interesting to see. This track doesn't have a whole lot of banking. You got 14% as far as degrees, 14% degrees in all four corners. You got 9 degrees on the front stretch and 6% on the back stretch. And like you mentioned, Kevin, 1.33 miles. It's going to be a fun track. I really like Nashville, but I don't want to see as much carnage as we saw last year.
Well, and we're under the lights again. So it's going to be another Sunday night race. So not a Saturday race. I like the Saturdays personally, but be a night race. Obviously it gets hot in Nashville this time of year. So, sparks will be flying again. It brings up the intensity level a little bit. So if I had to make my pick, going early into this, I think I'm going to go with the 45 of Tyler Reddick. I think it's time for him to shine. He got a P3 here last year. We've seen those guys. We talked earlier about Trackhouse to turn things around. I think it's time for 23 Excited to dial it in, and Tyler Reddick's the guy to do it.
Kevin, you took that right out from under me. I don't know. I guess, I was trying to be different. I didn't want to pick a Ford. I wanted to, I really had a good feeling about Tyler Reddick, but I don't want to pick the same. So I think I'm just going to go 12. He needs the rebound. He needs to get a win. He deserves a win. So I'm going to go Ryan Blaney.
And you guys are both killing me. I think the 12 this would be a good track for him to go to. But playing off Kevin a little bit, I'm actually going to go with the number 1 of Ross Chastain. I think he's got that momentum. He's got everything coming behind him. He's excited. I think he can do it. Like you said, he won it 2 years ago. This could be a track where he could take it down.
You think the Watermelon Man goes back to back? That's an aggressive pick.
I don't know. It's tough, man. If it's not going to be him, I'm going to go with the 24 William Byron, but I'm going to stick with the number 1 for right now.
I think those are safe picks. I mean, and then obviously from the fantasy perspective, I think you got to talk Hendrick Motorsports. Byron definitely leading the pace. When does Chase Elliott break out? When does the 9 start leading laps, start winning stages, start being in the conversation? Like, the 9's going to win this race. Does it happen in Nashville? Does it happen in Mexico City where you can dial the road course package in? When do we see NASCAR's most popular driver back in the conversation?
Yeah, that one's really tough to say because as we've talked about the last couple of years, in this next gen car, he has not won a road course yet. So I don't know. When is the number 9 going to come into play? He hasn't figured out the road courses, and I think that's where he did the best, before the next gen cars came about. So the 9, I think he needs to pick up his speed a little bit if he wants to be in contention. But like you said, he's keeping the points up there. So far he's in the playoff positions. But he definitely has some catching up to do, in my opinion.
I definitely agree, especially when, his teammates are doing as well as they are. I don't think that Chase is doing horrible by any means, especially compared to the last few years that we've seen him struggle. But, I don't know if he might luck out at a super speedway, but I feel like if he's going to get a win, it's probably going to be somewhere like Bristol, some like short track probably.
Probably a good call. I mean, and when we look ahead here to these next few races, obviously we got the Cracker Barrel 400 coming up here at Nashville this weekend. Then we go to the Firekeepers Casino 400 in Michigan. So we're going from that 1.33, go to the 2 mile, and then we're going to Mexico City, which is going to be pretty wild. We'll obviously be getting amped up for that. These are all on Prime, of course, and then we go to the Tricky Triangle Pocono to round out the primes. So I mean, we have June is going to be a difficult month. I think when you look at just the diversity of these racetracks, the traveling that's going to be involved to Mexico and bouncing around to some of these areas. And then, of course, we close out June at a super speedway back to Atlanta. So, I mean, the next 5 weeks, I think we're going to see a lot of new winners, first-time winners. Does Ty Gibbs, finally find victory lane? I think we're going to have a lot of storylines coming out of the month of June.
Yeah, like I said, the diversity and the differences between every single one of these next 4 or 5 races is incredible. So, I mean, there's so many drivers that, obviously are good at mile and a half or short track And I think Sky might have hit it. I think maybe Chase Elliott does do well on a short track coming up. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited to see Mexico City. Be really interesting. But back to what Sky kind of mentioned earlier about the Coca-Cola 600 and Ross Chastain, wrecking in practice, started P40. Those guys, I don't know if they got any sleep rebuilding that car, because they were there, I think they said, till like 2:30, 3:30 in the morning. Luckily, that race was in Charlotte, so they were able to go home for just a few hours. But, like they're saying, did they even sleep? I think it was probably just a quick shower and a bite to eat, run straight back to to the garage, get another car completely put together. And that's why I think I'm sticking with Ross Chastain for next week, because those guys really busted their ass and did a great job of getting that car put back together, and for him to come back and get P1.
It's definitely Ross Chastain's a strong choice, especially because he has this momentum. Like, I think you're onto something there, Jeff. I won't lie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'll be curious to see if they can back it up. I don't think this was a one-off. I think the speed's been there. He's shown he can drive through the field, overcome adversity, had the worst pit stall selection of the group. Ross is definitely Ross the boss, Chastain, the watermelon man. I think he can get it done for sure. So, we'll see. I think Nashville's gonna be interesting. I like the fact that it's under the lights on Prime. And speaking of Prime, obviously that Earnhardt documentary has dropped. The first 2 episodes are available. I think the second 2 come out this Thursday. I don't know if either of you guys had a chance to watch it. I caught up on it a little bit earlier today. And so far, I think it's tremendous.
I'm down here at Mom and Dad's house in Southern Colorado. So we watched the race last night, got up this morning. We did watch the first 2 episodes of Earnhardt on Prime. Really, really great watch. And like you said, Kevin, it drops on the 29th for the second 2 episodes. Once we got done with that, we actually wound up watching Ford versus Ferrari. So it's been a full race day for Mom. I feel bad for her, but she loves it. She loves NASCAR. She loves watching the race, and Dad and I loved it. But one thing I wanted to ask you guys, because I saw Mark Martin put a post up on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, over the weekend. And he was talking about the point systems in the playoffs. And he was like, just curious on what people thought about the playoff format, and wanted to see who thinks we should keep the current playoff format. Should we go back to a 10 race chase, or go to the classic 30 race season, or just change it all altogether? And 60% of the people out there that got polled said they want to go to the classic 36 race season. And I can't remember who was saying it a little while back, where they're talking about, the way the format is these days is, I think it was old Junebug Jr. said it. He's like, these guys don't have the sense of urgency anymore. It's like, okay, yeah, we didn't do that well this race. That's okay. We got next week. I mean, all you can do is win 1 race, punch it, and you're in the playoffs. So there's not that sense of urgency, where we have to have a good season. I mean, if you have 2 or 3 bad races in a row with the old format, your whole season's screwed. So you really have to do a damn good job throughout the whole year. And I kind of like that. I kind of like going back to the old classic 36 race season. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I voted for that as well. I know it's a lot coming from a Penske fan, and I will scream this until I'm blue in the face, but we all complain about how these drivers, Logano, Chase and Blaney, they don't deserve the championships they got, da da da. But to me, it's like, if you want to have a format that awards a driver, a correct driver, or someone who everybody can agree, like, the only way is to go a full season format, like, where you go week in and week out. I also feel like that would cut back on all these dumb moves that these drivers make, like how we talked about sometimes. Carson Hocevar kind of makes these aggressive moves that kind of screw everything up, but it's like, oh, well, I have next week, so it doesn't matter. But if it was a 36, race season format, you can't think like that, So I think we should go back to that. Well, it'll probably never happen, but that's my opinion.
Well, it's definitely a topic we've covered a lot here on Mash the Gas this year, is the playoff format and what should we do with it. And I'm still open to ideas. I mean, personally, being a 90s Jeff Gordon fan, I love the old point system. I want to see 36 races. The driver with the most points wins. It used to come down to Atlanta. We'd see the chaos. And I'm okay with going back to that. You look at how a lot of other motorsports are scored, from NHRA to F1, Indy. I mean, they tried like the countdown with NHRA. They've tried to do different playoff style formats, but the fact remains, wins and accumulated points are what pays, right? That's why Tony Stewart is the current point leader over there in NHRA Top Fuel. It's just about positions, points. At the end of the year, whoever has the most gets the championship. We understand why NASCAR wanted to do the chase, and then they wanted to go to the playoff format. It creates excitement. But I think it's time for us to reevaluate it. You got guys like Mark Martin polling people on it. More than half the fan base wants to see it go back. But I agree with Sky. I just don't see it happening.
Yep, not going to happen. But I just want to throw that in there because time's about out, folks, and time to move on, Kevin.
We're on to Nashville, down to the honky tonk. It's a racetrack that's been on my list. I haven't been down there. I'd like to go down and see some of the chaos that happens in Nashville. I know a lot of people want to see it go back to the Nashville Fairgrounds, which is a shorter racetrack, just 10, 15 miles away from Nashville Super Speedway. But I'm all about it. Let's pack them in. It should be a great weekend. Cracker Barrel 400 coming up here on Prime this weekend. I expect another great performance out of those guys. Everything we've seen out of Prime so far, I am behind, and I think they're just going to build on it, and the coverage is going to get better. So we will be back next Monday night to break down all the action from Nashville Super Speedway. Will we see multiple overtimes? Will we see a green flag run? Who knows? I think it's up in the air. Will we see a first-time winner? Time will tell. But be sure to follow us across the board, Mash the Gas Podcast on all social media platforms. Be sure to follow Sky over there at NASCAR Sky. And until then, y'all,
Mash the gas.